don't let this one get away. The Northwest Sports Show, March 13th through the 16th at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Find the newest in fishing and outdoor gear, boats, RVs, travel, power sports, and more. There's no better time to try, buy, and save. And make sure to join 9 to noon's Nordo this Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. for the Friday Night Fish Fry. Get all the details now at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar. One more hour to go on the Tennafitzgerald. My third co-host of the day is the producer, sidekick for the Bumper to Bumper show. That would be Justin Gaard. And JG, I'm assuming a sad, sad day for the Bumper to Barrero show because one of your guests, Cam Bynum, is no longer a Minnesota Viking.
Did that just happen?
Yeah, it happened last segment when I was chatting with Meat Sauce. He signs a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Indianapolis Colts. So one, you now are lacking a great guest that you had on every single week during the football season. Two, you also strike me as the kind of guy that you love the pop culture celebrations that he would do every single week.
I like that he seemed to bring people together. I like that he seemed to have a good time at work. I did like that. But no, number one is much more important for us. Now we're in another summer of uncertainty and conversations over who's going to be the Bumper to Bumper regular on Mondays. Because those negotiations take a really long time sometimes.
Yeah.
And we have tryouts and we have a lot of negotiations. So that's too bad. Good for him, though. He earned it. I mean, he definitely earned it, so good for him.
He tweeted a emoji of the heartbroken. Who else in the world signs a 4-year, $60 million deal and then signs a heartbroken emoji or puts tweets a heartbroken emoji?
Like it happened to him. Like
yes.
This whole thing happened to him.
Oh, no, I signed a $60 million contract, but I am going to have to move, so I guess that's a challenge.
He gets to go to the greatest host city in the history of host cities, Indianapolis. Is that where he said he's going?
Yes.
So who wouldn't want to go there? I was just there last week. What a city.
I'm surprised you haven't gotten a job in Indianapolis.
They're too hard to get. No one ever leaves them. They're too hard to get. Nobody ever leaves Indy. Why would you willingly leave Indianapolis? It's the greatest city of all time.
That's one of my favorite bits you do on Twitter.
I don't even have to do it anymore. It's become one of those.
Everyone else does it.
Everyone else does it.
You just retweet it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Let's talk about the quarterback carousel that's been going on. We had Geno Smith traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. We find out today now that Sam Darnold will no longer play for the Minnesota Vikings. He signs a 3-year, around $100 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks. We also know Justin Fields will go to the New York Jets for 2 years, $40 million. So still waiting on Aaron Rodgers, maybe a little Russell Wilson. But obviously the biggest story here for Vikings fans is Sam Darnold. We knew it was coming, but now he's officially no longer a member of the Vikings. He gets paid.
What's interesting about this is a deal that we all kind of threw out in like November and December when we were talking about, do the Vikings keep Sam Darnold? What do they do with Sam Darnold? And in November, this kind of deal almost didn't seem possible at one point, right? We thought, is he really going to take a Baker Mayfield type deal with the season that he's just had? So it's kind of interesting how it's gone from, what he was a year ago at this time to 3-4 months ago. Well, he's not going to take a Baker deal. That's a big discount. To should they franchise him the whole bit? It kind of settled just on this middle of the road deal. So now I'm kind of wondering, I'm glad the Vikings didn't do this. I think at some point you do have to see what you have with J.J. McCarthy. I do think you have to make it his team because they've been planning on that for a really long time. And let's see what else they do here in the next couple of days. I know they signed the one corner. This is, I think, a pretty fair Sam Darnold contract. I don't think it jumps out and everybody goes, whoa. I think it's okay. Yeah, that seems reasonable. That seems like a reasonable deal for him. $55 million
I feel
guaranteed.
like I could be an NFL GM because that was the deal I'd been talking about throughout December. I said, hey, he gets free agency, he'll get a Baker Mayfield type deal. I think that would be the fair, because of his past.
Right.
And let's face it, because of the last 2 games of his season, the regular season finale against Detroit and the playoff game, there's still a little bit of doubt with him, right? I think he did enough this year to prove that he's not the same guy he was in New York and not the same guy he was in Carolina and is worthy of being a starting quarterback in this league. But he has enough bit of doubt that you can't just go all in with a guy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that's why the Vikings were comfortable just letting him get to free agency, seeing what his market was going to be. And I don't think I would have wanted him for, I don't know I know contracts you can get out of him basically at any point, like the 3 years, 100 and whatever million and the 55 guaranteed. That's really the big one to worry about. But yeah, so I think it's a good limp in, I guess. You're a poker player.
Yeah.
Or you have been.
Look at you at the poker tournament.
I mean, it's a good way to kind of limp in if you're the Seahawks.
You want to see the flop.
Sure.
Yeah. And maybe you get a straight flush draw and you can hang around for a little bit longer.
And I think he's an upgrade from what they had in Seattle, as much as Geno kind of rehabilitated his career. I think he's worth investing in at this point more than Geno Smith would have been. So to trade him, clear the runway for Darnold, let him go out there. I know he's worked with whichever Kubiak is out there in Seattle.
It's Clint now.
Clint, who we had here, and then he was in San Francisco. We had all the Kubiaks at one point. And so I think this makes sense.
By the way, Gary Kubiak does not get enough credit for his run here, because I am convinced when they drafted Justin Jefferson, I'm convinced that was Gary Kubiak that was pounding on the door for that. Right? Really? If you ever watch the video back of
that they put out
the Zoom meeting with Zimmer and Spielman, and Gary Kubiak was on that thing. I think he was pounding the door for him.
Well, have PA FaceTime him. We could get to the bottom of it. We could get to the bottom of it really
quickly. Ryan can do an impression of him, probably.
Yes, he probably could. So anyway, it has been funny all day that everybody was kind of waiting for this Darnold domino to fall.
Yep.
And because I heard Sauce and you talking about it before it dropped. Like, if I was him, I would have really called Pittsburgh and seen what's going on there too. Because they obviously nothing's happened with them, right? Because Fields is going to the Jets. Is that right?
Fields is going to the Jets. So basically, Pittsburgh and New York Giants are the two big openings here. I'm assuming
that still have a need.
It's probably going to be a Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers situation.
Yeah,
I can't imagine is there anyone else out there?
No, and I heard you guys talking about the Rodgers rumors here over the weekend.
Made no sense to me.
Just stop. We can't do that. Just don't do that. Why? Why would we do that? That makes... We spent all this time building the greatest culture in the history of professional sports, and then Aaron Rodgers is going to come in here and just slide in. I guess it would be a test of the culture to see how tight things really are out there. But
even if you take away the culture aspect of it, which I think is a huge part of it,
is he good?
He couldn't throw the ball past 10 yards last year.
Right.
And I guess maybe you can make the argument, hey, it's a year after an Achilles injury and 2 years removed, he'll be much better, right? But part of what made Aaron Rodgers great in Green Bay, I thought,
extending plays,
exactly. Like he ain't a Lamar Jackson. He's not a Justin Fields in that regard. But how many times would he just kill you with? You'd pressure him. He'd roll out right. He'd expend the play, and all of a sudden he's hitting Jordy Nelson down the field for 75. Like that aspect of his game, that element of his game is gone.
Right.
And it's not like he didn't have guys to work with there. He had Garrett Wilson. They acquired Devontae Adams. So it's not like he was just thrown with nothing on offense and didn't have any weapons to go to. Like I said, unless you want to argue, hey, 2 years removed from Achilles, he'll be a lot more mobile again.
Maybe.
But at his age, that's not a bet I'm willing to make.
Well, and the other thing, though, the Vikings have to think about now is it's hilarious, but Nick Mullins keeps finding work. I mean, a nice deal there. 3 years, 2 years, 6.5 million.
KFC's getting everybody paid.
He is. You work
Cousins
for KFC.
Got paid last year still.
It's true. He's got guys' jobs now, right? Obviously, with Udinsky's getting the offensive coordinator job. He's like 12 years old. And so now a lot of people thought, so what are they going to do for backup? Because Daniel Jones is still floating out there, right? It sounds like he's choosing between Indy and here, apparently, is what's going on. Because they do have to have somebody in the. They always like to talk about the quarterback room and having optionality. Well, the room's empty. Guys are leaving. Darnold's gone. Mullins is gone. We'll see what happens with Daniel Jones. They've got JJ, and there's one other guy, Brett Rippon, right?
There is a lot of veteran type quarterback backups available, right? You've got like your Jacoby Brissett's and your Taylor Heineke's and your Drew Locks and your Joe Flacco's.
It's a good gig.
Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston.
It's a good gig.
Those guys are available.
I actually would like Jameis Winston.
Actually, Gardner Minshew's available now, is he? That's who I would want.
I would like Winston
I love
just for the bit.
Well, it'd be fun.
It'd be electric. Imagine PA doing a Jameis Winston game. It would be electric with Bursich stepping all over him on a touchdown or an interception.
You never know what's going to happen.
That's the beauty of Jameis Winston. So we will see what they... I still think Daniel Jones probably comes back here on a Darnold-like deal. That would be my betting money. I don't know why you wouldn't. Why wouldn't you go to the KOC rehabilitation school? You just watch Darnold get 3 for 110. You just watch Darnold get 3 for 110. He's probably thinking, I've done more than Darnold at this point in my career. I've won a playoff game. I've gotten a big contract. I liked what happened here the last 6 weeks or however long he was. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward now with the emptiness in their quarterback room.
All right, we'll continue to talk NFL free agency. We'll let you know if there's any breaking news as we move forward here for the next 49 minutes.
How's Twitter doing? Is Twitter hanging in?
It's much better now.
Is it
last hour, it's been much. As I was talking with Meat Sauce and Nordo, I can track specific moves. You're right. When Twitter was down, I can track, but it's the rumors, it's the steam, it's the
closing in on.
Yeah, Darnold is choosing between these two teams. Like that's the stuff I was missing on. It's like out of all the days, Elon, come on, why you got to do that today?
Exactly right. This is the guy who's cleaning up Washington right now.
Make it more efficient.
It's the biggest Twitter day of the year.
Yeah. All right, more to go with Justin Gaard. We'll obviously continue talking football. I also want to talk Timberwolves and Gopher basketball with him before we hit 3 o'clock as well. All right, welcome back. Tennafitzgerald. There's a little JG&B today. Justin Gaard from the Bumper to Bumper show with Dan Burrow here until 3 o'clock. And JG, I know you're not as big of a hockey guy as me, but you're now a hockey dad.
I am.
And I know you love high school sports. The high school hockey tournament, despite not necessarily being a hockey guy, is always one that you're watching every single year. And I think it didn't let us down again this year.
It was awesome. It was awesome. Not only am I into the high school hockey tournament, good for me, I am a season ticket holder for the high school hockey tournament.
Oh, my God.
I'm a little bitter that you are and I'm not.
Well, you need to just get on the waiting list. I got on the waiting list like 20 years ago. And like 15 years ago, I got an email. And I've had tickets ever since, like 2013.
How big is the waiting list right now?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But so I took Father of the Year. I grabbed the Gray Man out of school at about 10 o'clock on Thursday. We went down and watched Stillwater, Andover, and then St. Thomas, whoever they played in the first round. I can't remember who.
Did they play Shakopee?
Shakopee, yeah, in the first round. So we went to do that. And then, we were locked in all weekend. The championship game was fascinating. Moorhead's hilarious. First of all, it's awesome that they won. Like, how cool was that whole scene?
Yep.
And then the hotel after, those videos that are circulating now. Like, they were at the X yesterday. I brought my daughter to the Wild game yesterday. And they were at the X, like walking around with their medals.
You're a hockey guy.
I'm a puckhead. Yeah, I'm a puckhead. And also, sidebar, because it was so nice yesterday, now the team didn't exactly play like this after, but it felt like those days where we've been on West 7th, like before a playoff game, like right when Parisi and Suter got here, like weather was good, the water's running down the street, everybody's fired up to go to the game, the place was packed. It felt like one of those playoff days, and obviously the performance didn't really warrant that. No! But I don't know how you can blame them necessarily. They've got most of their team out. But Moorhead's weird in that they'll get down like 2-0 and then be up 4-2 in 9 seconds.
Yep.
And then the game will be tied. And like even watching the championship game, like it should have been a wrap like 5 times, but you just knew it wasn't going to be. And it was really close there for a second. But it was awesome. It always delivers. I can't believe I have the same sensation every year watching the tourney or listening to Halvey and Fallness. Like they're high school kids out there.
Yeah.
Like if you just stop for a minute, and I try to, when you think about their 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, it's insane the level that they play at. And
the attention and the pressure.
The pressure that they, and you know this because you're a hockey dad, and anybody that's been through youth sports, like for some of those kids, they've been thinking about it their entire life. Like for the Edina kids, they think it's their destiny to be there, right?
Yes.
Like it's not like a dream. It's like,
for me, it was a dream.
Yeah, it's not a dream.
For them, it was
we're
massive disappointment if we don't get there.
Exactly, and they're probably bitter.
You might be shunned in society.
Yeah, they lost on Friday night, so I'm sure they're bitter. Good job by them to beat the Cadets on Saturday. But they think it's their destiny. A lot of these kids have been literally working since they were our kids' age with that in mind, and then it's finally there, and they always play well. The level is always so good, and it was great. And Channel 45 does an awesome job with it. Halvey and his crew do a great job with it. It was sweet.
I feel like every single state tournament for the last 15, 20 years, there's always been something that people on social media are going to go complain about, right? Like it was always St. Thomas Academy. Why are they playing Class A? Then it was Hermantown. Why are they playing Class A? Gentry Academy, should they allow to be in here or not? Right? And there's always like some sort of, it might be a referee's call that everyone's complaining about, or right? There's always something going on. I felt like we didn't have any of that this year. It was kind of nice and refreshing. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe I missed something.
Yeah,
I felt like there was like no social media controversy tied to the tournament, and that's very rare.
Well, first of all, when you talk about Hermantown, you need to say it correctly.
Hermantown.
You have to say it correctly every time. Whenever you want to
Out of
bring
breath, I got to say it.
Hermantown.
Yeah, you just have to bring this up.
Hermantown.
Do you think part of that was because there was a lot of new blood? Like,
I do think so,
There
yes.
was only one.
I think there was a lot of like new blood and like more likable team. Right? People get sick of Hermantown. I know St. Thomas Academy was there, but at least
Hermantown.
they're double A now, so people don't complain as much.
Right.
Felt like there was there as much private schools? I felt like, like Shakopee's new and Moorhead had the story.
I know Andover's been in a time. They've won it, right? A few years ago. And that's kind of a hockey town now. But
even like Stillwater, they're there instead of Hill Murray.
I think that was part of it, that there wasn't that familiarity, that you didn't have that contempt. And I think the Moorhead story.
The other part of this too is like Class A. Historically, Class A, there's been a couple good teams and then a couple teams that should not be anywhere near them.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I don't know what the explanation. Like this year, I felt like all 8 Class A teams, like they all have like a legit chance in their games. Like they belong. It's not going to be a 10-0 yawner where the game's over right away.
Right.
And even in Double A, all those Lakeville South had a great chance to win their opening round.
Lakeville
game.
South played awesome. I mean, they threw haymakers at Moorhead.
Yes.
Like that was a tough one for them to get through. And it was great. And so I think new blood, I think the fact that the level was good, like you said, for every single game. And it doesn't happen very often when everybody, for the most part, and I'm sure, Stillwater and Edina don't like to hear it, but everybody wanted to see Moorhead win because they'd never won it. And they'd been there a million times. And when you can have a former Spud coaching that had lost a title game or two and multiple players, multiple players that had dads that played for teams that had lost, that's a great story. And to see it finally come together and to see the scenes even after in the hotel, I mean, that's incredible stuff.
Well, think about all the big names that were attached to this term, like from a coaching standpoint, right? Because you mentioned Matt Cullen coaching for Moorhead. For Stillwater, the head coach, Greg Zanin, used to play for the Wild. Thomas Vanek,
right?
His kid is on the team.
Right.
Jordan Leopold, helping coach for Andover. I mean, it's
crazy.
Just former huge names.
Nobody even remembers that Kurt Giles played for the North Stars, right?
Well, yeah.
He's been there 50 times.
We don't even know him as a North Star anymore. We just know him as the Edina head coach.
The Edina coach. Everybody just assumes, but that's who's coaching. I mean, we've joked about it, and we're only going to see that, I think, get more and more prevalent because it seems like every former hockey player.
Oh, they're all at Edina now.
Exactly.
You wait. The Edina team's coming through in the next 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be the Parisis and the Spurgeons. And does Ryan Suter still live here? He probably doesn't anymore.
Suits, I think. Who knows?
Did they get out? But his kids were playing in Edina for the longest time.
But
all the Wild players go to Edina now.
But then other NHL players are either in Orono or Minnetonka, because I'm looking at Dustin Bufflin's kid yesterday at the Mite
How
Jamboree.
huge is he?
Pretty big. Pretty big. So Big Buff's out on the ice. My son's assistant coach played 6 years in the NHL. We had a Hobie Baker Award winner on the staff. All those guys. So that we're going to see all that. And then there's me as the hockey dad. I'm the greatest hockey dad ever because I don't know how to skate. So I'm never going to question anything. I'm like, you won the Hobie? Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
all right.
I'll let you make the decision.
Yeah, whatever you think with Gray is fine. I have if he needs to play defense today.
As long as he's happy and he's smiling and he wants to go to hockey.
Exactly.
You're good to go.
But the point is, there's so many. Oposo just moved into the neighborhood. Oposo's got a kid that plays. They're going to be. It's just going to be littered with great players. It always has been.
Yeah.
There's so many.
I'm so excited for them to all go to different private schools and never play high school together.
Well, if it's easier for my kid to make a team somewhere, I'd love it if they make their own super team. If they want to create their own high school, that'd be good. So I think that's part of it too, is you get so many familiar faces. It's great that all those people are involved, quite frankly. I know sometimes not everything's universal. Sometimes we could go 2 hours on youth sports and coaching and professionals and the whole bit, but I love the fact that so many of them are involved with kids because I think it helps a lot of kids out.
The last thing is the hockey hair video, which never misses.
Yeah.
It never disappoints.
I didn't watch it this year yet.
Oh, you need to watch it.
Okay.
Because he's always good. It amazes me, the cottage industry, that video has built in the state of Minnesota, right? Now every single kid is growing out their hair in the most bizarre fashion. So if they ever make it to the state tournament, they're doing it so they can be on the video.
Got a plan.
You now have managers dressing up as Dumb and Dumber.
Those were the heroes this year, I thought, because I thought they went to a different level.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It keeps going to more and more. And now it's to the point where if you're on TikTok, it's going to show up on your TikTok. It's going to be on the ESPN feed. It's right. Like, it is getting national attention every single year. You're getting like hair products that are being created off of this. And the guy who started this, John King, like, probably could have made a lot of money off of this if he had chosen to.
Yeah.
And has never tried to make it more than what it is, and has like donated all the money to the Hendrickson Foundation. And I think that's pretty cool.
Tremendous.
Like the amount of other people that are making money off of this from his idea. And he has just said, hey, I'm just going to make sure this is all going to a good cause and doing it for the right reason.
It's perfect.
It's very admirable.
It's perfect. Yeah, the whole thing was tremendous. And shout out again to the managers, because you've got to be creative now to up your game, right? And they were...
Well, you're from Edina, so you like the attention-seeking aspect of this.
I think it's cool, though. I've always appreciated...
Even like all the celebrations now, they all fly down to the other end of the ring.
You know who didn't? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Moorhead.
Yes, I tweeted about it.
Did you? Every time, right to the bench.
They celebrated as a team.
That was great.
I love it.
It was great. Yeah, we're honorary spuds if they'll have us.
Sorry, we're sounding like boomers right now, but that's okay.
We are.
We're on one final segment. I'm sure we'll get back into football and update you on any moves that have been made over the last 15, 20 minutes. And I do want to talk a little basketball with you, JG. Go for basketball starting the Big Ten tournament this week. Timberwolves on a 5-game winning streak. We'll do that one final segment, JG and B, next. Welcome back, JG&B, Tennafitzgerald, along with Justin Gaard from Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barrero. JG, are you someone who believes that football games are won in the trenches?
I am.
Well, Chicago Bears are going to start winning a lot more games because they are building up the trenches.
I wondered if you were going to go there, because I think that's the story of free agency so far. I think that's the story.
Breaking news within the last minute or two, the former Falcons Pro Bowl defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, who was released today from Atlanta. That was a big story, and he was released. He's already found a new home, reaching agreement on a 3-year, $43.5 million deal, including $28.5 million fully guaranteed with the Chicago Bears. So the Bears, so far not in this offseason. On the defensive side, defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, also defensive end Dayo Odeyingbo. On the offensive side, left guard Joe Thuney, center Drew Dahlman, right guard Jonah Jackson. Obviously, they also got Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, now as their head coach. They knew last year you had your quarterback that you took first overall in the draft. You had some good weapons on the outside, and they are fixing up the trenches for that team.
I think they're the story of free agency so far in the division, right? For sure.
Well, definitely in the division.
And even with they made a trade. I know you just recapped everything. I was just looking at some salary cap stuff to kind of see where they were before all this started. They're clearly taking a look at what made Detroit good here recently, right? Great offensive and defensive lines. Certainly the teams that made the Super Bowl, great offensive and defensive lines. And that's what they're doing. It kind of reminds me when Chile got here. That's kind of how the Vikings operated. If you remember, that's when they went and got Hutchinson. I think they drafted Lodeholt around that time. I think McKinney had already been here, so they had the left tackle. But they kind of went with the same philosophy. They traded for Jared Allen, like, pretty shortly thereafter. Like, it is, for as much as we like to talk about everything else, and it's all quarterback-driven and who your wide receivers are and skill position players, like the teams that do this stuff, like every time I look up, the Bears have a new lineman on one of the sides. It's impressive. But I think that's how you start winning games. Like you have to be competitive in the trenches first.
Yep.
So you're not completely overmatched. And then once you really get good there, like some of these other teams have, that's when you start winning at a really high level. So the Bears have made a lot of nice moves here, I think.
Well, and if you have a young quarterback, which they do in Caleb Williams, right, that happens quite a bit where the guy who's drafted number 1 overall is just being drafted typically to a bad team. Now, Chicago was a little bit different because they had acquired the Carolina Panthers number 1 pick. So they weren't your true, 2-15 type of number 1 overall pick. But they had some holes. When you have a quarterback like that, like you don't want to ruin that guy. And having poor offensive line play is a quick way to ruin your quarterback's confidence. Now, let's talk about what the Vikings then with J.J. McCarthy, right? I think we're pretty happy with the tackles. on both sides. But the interior offensive line is something they were expected to fix in free agency up until this point, and we have not addressed that.
Now, the one place, part of the reason why I like, and I don't even know his name, I heard Sauce and you talking about whoever they signed, or whoever they agreed to terms with, the cornerback.
Oh, Isaiah Rodgers.
Isaiah Rodgers. Like, this is the one area where I feel pretty confident in Kwesi and the staff. Like, I feel like they do.
And B-Flow.
And exactly.
Yes.
B-Flow picking guys that he likes, that he thinks can fit the certain scheme, and then going out and finding the good value. I mean, what they did in free agency last year was ridiculous when you go back and look at it, right? With Cashman, with Grenard, with Van Ginkel.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So I have a lot more faith.
Other than Grenard, they were all mostly on the cheap.
Yeah. The Grenard was the headliner,
They're
right?
all value picks.
And you love value picks.
I do.
I know that. So I like the fact I'm cool with them taking as many of those types of swings as they can. But yeah, they have to. So I would prefer that they do it if those guys are available in free agency, because the drafting part of it is very spotty, as we know, extremely spotty, as we know. They just showed some Jordan Addison highlights. That's like the one that you can point to and say, there's our guy from, 3 drafts now or 2 drafts? So
the problem with going the Kwesi approach last year, it was a great 1-year fix. The problem is when you're just grabbing guys short-term deals for not a lot of money, when they do perform well, you either have to pay them.
True.
Or you're going to pay them or lose them.
True.
And I mean, that's why you have to eventually be
Find
successful. You have to be successful in the draft.
It's true.
And they've gotten away with it to a certain extent up until this point. I don't think Kwesi can afford to miss any more drafts.
It is interesting that he has no contract extension, right? As far as we know.
Maybe they're waiting until after free agency in the draft.
Man, that's pretty wild. Now, I mean, I understand why, but it's interesting that KOC, there was very little hesitation. And with Kwesi, there's been some.
Well, and the rumors was that KFC was getting more decision power with it at the time. So that's a whole other thing, is how do they figure out this hierarchy of who makes decisions, who doesn't. Another offensive lineman off the books to a division rival. Ian Rappaport reports that 49ers guard Aaron Banks is expected to sign with the Packers as Jordan Love gets another bodyguard. And I thought I saw the deal somewhere else. It was pretty expensive. Let me keep scrolling here. Yes, 4 years, $77 million. So Aaron Banks, and I'm seeing a picture of him. He is huge.
He's massive.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, they got to find some dudes there. Because was it the day after or right after they lost to the Rams? Kevin O'Connell talked about the interior of the offensive line needing to be fixed. It was one of the two. And so knowing that you put that out there publicly, they're thinking about it. They're trying to figure it out. And so is it going to be now? Is it going to be next week after the first wave, to use that cliche? Is it going to be in the draft? It's got to be at some point, because that needs fortification for sure.
I would say maybe the biggest Vikings news of the day, I guess you could say Darnold signing with Seattle, obviously, and Cam Bynum going on to Indianapolis. But free agent defensive tackle Jonathan Allen visiting Minnesota reportedly today. He spent 8 seasons in the NFL. He's historically been a healthy player, though this past season he missed half the season with that torn pectoral muscle. But 2-time Pro Bowler, clearly, for all the talk we've heard about the offensive line over the years, I feel like we always neglect the interior of the defensive line just because it's typically not a
glamour.
It's not a sexy position. It's not a position that typically puts up a bunch of numbers. But we've been woefully inadequate, not only on the interior of the offensive line, but on the defensive line. That's
where things started to fall apart in the Zimmer era, when teams were started to be able to run the ball against them pretty effectively. Because I think those yards get kind of hidden from time to time. Like, you don't notice when a team's just gashing you for 5 or 6 a carry. And that's when they started to lose control of the Zim Reaper defense, when that started to happen. And even going back to the Chile era, when the Vikings defense was probably as good as it ever was, they had Pat Williams, they had Kevin Williams, they had guys like that. Jerry Ball was here for a minute. Like, they had dudes that could stop the run, because it sounds cliche, but this last Super Bowl is the greatest example that you need of everything else. You have to be able to run. You have to be able to stop it. You've got to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. It's just really not that complicated. And again, we'll see. The Allen thing's interesting, because I wonder, is this a day one, like, get him in here, let's sign him, let's not let him leave type deal? Or is it we want to see how he's doing? His agent's local, we know that. So we want to see what he's up to.
Doing, maybe.
Want to see his health,
physical action.
We're going to ride this thing out for a while, because we've done that with guys over the years. Dalton Reisner comes to mind. Maybe not necessarily day one of free agent, but bring him in for a visit. We're thinking about signing you. Teams don't come to an agreement, and you circle back to him a little bit later. I don't know.
The reason you need to have someone in the middle is we've seen this on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like there's just certain matchups that have been good for the offensive line and bad for the offensive line, right? Like we've had a run now of Garrett Bradbury in the middle that whenever we play teams that have big, huge, fat guys in the middle of their offensive line or defensive line, Green Bay has done it.
Yep.
We struggle, right? So if you want to get through like an extended playoff run, like you got to be able to be versatile and be like, eventually you're going to be in a game defensively where, well, maybe our edge rushers aren't going to be able to get as much this game because we're playing teams with good tackles. We got to be able to attack in a different area. And that's just, they haven't had that versatility and that balance.
I think it's a good word for it. I think versatility is the right word for it. You got to be able to win a couple of different ways because we even saw in the playoffs, like the Vikings, once their plan A wasn't working, they had no ability to pivot to something else. Now, was that because they weren't ready for it? Was that because they couldn't do it? Did KOC freeze up in the worst time? I don't know. But once it was pretty obvious they weren't going to be able to do what they wanted to do, they had no ability to turn the page and figure out something different.
All right, let's talk about your Minnesota Timberwolves. I want to know, I know you're a big basketball fan. You're a big Wolves fan. Even if they won the NBA title, you'd be sad the next day because you have to stop watching them.
It's true. How far did that statement go, by the way? A round or two?
It might have won a round or two, but it didn't go too deep.
I didn't think it had a lot of staying power, but I said it. I can't deny that I said it.
But it's been kind of a roller coaster season for this Timberwolves team, right? Coming off of a season in which very good regular season, get to the Western Conference Finals. We all know about the moves they made in the offseason. And you kind of get off to the slow start, and specifically the guys you had brought in that trade, and Julius Randle and DiVincenzo, not doing a whole lot at the beginning of the season, and now seems like they're finding their footing a little bit. What is your confidence level? What's your comfort level of where the Wolves are at this very point?
Yeah, I think for how this season has gone right now, I think they're in a pretty good spot. They're doing what they needed to do in this stretch of schedule, which has them playing now. Wednesday night, they go to Denver, who's the 3 seed right now and playing very well. We all know about the Nuggets. But there's not a lot of big-time pedigree teams that they're playing. They're playing mostly bad teams. And as we've said for a couple of weeks, ideally you would feel good about that. But if you've watched the Timberwolves this year, you know that there are no games that are picnics with this club, at least through the first however many games they've played here, the first 65-ish games. They've been able to make a mess of really bad teams. So the fact that they've, for the last 5 games, taken care of the business that they needed to take care of. And really, I know there was an adventurous finish the other night where it took them a minute to really close the door. They've played well since these guys came back. They started to play better with the young kids about 2 weeks ago, and now that DiVincenzo's back, he's on an absolute heater. He's exactly who they thought he was going to be. That took a while to get going. Randall, obviously, for the most part of the season, was not that guy. And
is he playing differently? Like,
yes.
Is it
I think
purely health? Is it?
No, I think he's playing differently. And he said as much. Like what I noticed, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the first game was back where he came back, but he was playing so much faster. Like everything just seemed quicker, and in just that game. And since then, that's continued. Like it seems like they're pushing the pace a lot more. They're pushing the tempo a lot more. The ball is moving a lot more freely.
It's not sticky.
It's not sticky, as Finchy likes to say. And the only time it really gets sticky still is with Ant from time to time, and which understandable. That's who he's going to be. Yeah. He's their best player. He's going to need the ball. He is successful a lot when he does that. But when he came back, what just jumped out to me was every decision Randall was making was quick. He was getting to his left hand quicker. If he didn't have a shot, he was kicking it to the corner quicker. Last night he had a great lob to Rudy, which everything was quick. It was coming off a pick and roll. Comes down the lane. Rudy switches the screen. He comes that way, lobs it, dunk. Place is going nuts. So they're playing so much cleaner. I think Finch said last night, aesthetically, it was probably their best offensive game of the season. I would probably agree with it. Now, San Antonio, without Wemby.
Well, statistically, it was.
Yeah. And it should be, because San Antonio right now is no good.
Yeah.
Like, my guy De'Aaron Fox just came back a few games ago. Wemby's going to be out for the rest of the season. They were kind of a sneaky team until then, but their best player's out. So they did last night what they should do, is rout a bad team. And so I'm going to give them credit because they're playing more engaged. They're playing better. They're playing with more desperation than they were earlier in the season. I know that all of that should be a prerequisite, and it's frustrating when it's not. But instead of thinking about what happened the first 50 games of the season or 60 games of the season, which was frustrating for sure, because it just seemed at times that they weren't totally engaged, that they felt like a team that thought like they could turn it on at any point. Randall did not seem like he was going to be a good fit, and he still might not be long-term. We'll see what they do with him this offseason, because he might be part of a Kevin Durant deal. Who knows, because there's always that off in the horizon. But they've got a really good situation in the last handful of games to get themselves up into the top 6. Golden State has not stopped losing since they got Jimmy Butler. They've won 9 of 10. That's the team that they're chasing first. But I said this last week, I would watch Memphis and I would watch Houston in terms of teams that I think took advantage of pretty easy schedules at the beginning of the season that have come back to the pack a little bit. Those two were like the 2 and 3 seed for a really long time. They're now back down, I think, to 4 and 5.
Yep.
And so you're within striking distance of them. I think you even play Memphis here in the next week or so. So that should be a legitimate goal. And now that they're getting everybody back, and Rudy came back last night for the first time in a while, like, they need to continue to play how they were playing when it was the Jalen Clark show and the Rob Dillingham show and the Terrence Shannon Jr. show, and those guys were coming in with the right energy, dedication, effort, intent, whatever cliche you want to use. And the older guys, to their credit, have come back in and continued that, and they're playing really good basketball against, yes, not very good competition. But if you've watched the Wolves this season, there's about 7 of those games where you just shake your head and go, how could they possibly lose that game? And it's frustrating because you see, if you look at the standings, how bunched up everybody is. You've got Oklahoma City, and then you've got the Lakers and Nuggets, but
there's 5 games back of the Lakers at number 2.
Exactly. So you can play the what if game of, man, if they would only just take care of this business. And LeBron hurt his groin trying to take a flop the other night. I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. That'll be, and it's too bad for them. They only have Luka to help get them through that. That's actually, I don't know how you feel. It's actually like ruined my enjoyment of watching the NBA because it's so frustrating.
And it just happens to be the Lakers.
That the Lakers just, like, they never...
Wasn't the Portland Trailblazers that landed Luka.
No, it's the Lakers because, and part of it is they're on so much, the national radar. Sauce talks about this all the time.
I was actually about to bring that up. I was going to bring up the Charles Barkley comments that he had. Remember, he just had a rant about ESPN. I think Kendrick Perkins. It's like nobody talks about the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Right.
Only in this league are we talking about the LA Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, who've been good for 2-3 weeks.
Right. It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. But I think every league has that. I mean, every league has their markets. We all joke about the Cowboys. Like, people are still talking about the Cowboys right now. They've done nothing. No one cares. Like, but they still get talked about. It does
seem to be even more so in the NBA, though, right? Like, the NFL is such a parity league that anyone can be good. Like, Yep. It seems like anyone in the NFL can get attention. The NHL is just all parity, and they don't get enough attention in general.
Right.
Baseball, I think, is probably very much like basketball, where it's going to be Yankees and Dodgers.
Yep. And because there's a lot of teams that just aren't in anybody's stratosphere, that you don't really even think about. But yeah, the Lakers are getting a lot of shine, and they've got Luka, they've got the GM that wears the fancy clothes, they've got JJ Redick, who I actually like. I loved that hire. I thought it was a cool idea, and I think he's working out pretty well because he's coaching, and they're actually like playing pretty legitimate defense out there. But anyway, to answer your original question, I think the Wolves are, for how the season has gone up to this point, I think they're in a good spot moving forward with how they're playing and who's in front of them and how they can kind of recenter things. Like, there's no team that I look at to go, well, they couldn't beat them in a 7-game series. Like, would I bet on it? Probably not. But I think they can make another decent little run.
Sure.
So we'll see.
How about the Gopher basketball team in the Big Ten tournament? Is there any team that they can't compete with?
No, but I would also say they could lose tomorrow to Northwestern. I mean, they could.
It's Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. What's today? Monday?
Yeah, today's Monday.
Yeah, they could. I could see them making the Big Ten tournament semifinals, and I could see them losing by 15 to Northwestern on Wednesday.
You don't know what team's going to show up.
But I also think that's after, and I don't even know who I would put at the top. I'd have to think about this. Because for football, I think we dealt with this a lot. There was like 2 teams at the top, 2 or 3 teams at the top, 2 or 3 teams at the bottom, and number 4 through 16. It felt like in any given Saturday, it's how the Gophers could beat, like a USC 1 week and then 2 weeks later lose to Rutgers. And Rutgers could, have a weird loss and then beat a good team. Like, I think everybody's kind of even. And like yesterday's a good example. Rutgers has 2 guys that are probably going to be picked in the top. One of them is going to be top 5 in the NBA draft. He's a freshman. Another guy's a first-round pick. Like, they haven't had a very good season, and yet they're right there with some of these other teams that you would think would have better seasons. It's just, so I don't know. So I could see them literally, because I think it's Northwestern, it would be into Wisconsin, and then maybe, can't remember who the next game would be. But I can see
UCLA is the 4 seed.
Who they beat.
They beat them.
They beat them in Westwood, right?
Yeah.
I could see them winning all 3 of those games. I could also see them losing to Northwestern on Wednesday. So I just think it's just a weird, and it's too bad for them. They got off to the 0-6 in the Big Ten because they've been pretty consistent.
500 since then.
They've been pretty consistent since then, had some good victories, but
some disappointing ones down the stretch, though, ones against weaker teams.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. The ones that leave you shaking your head. They could have jumped
up into like an 11 seed.
Even if they had won yesterday, I think they might have had that because I think they're the 13 now, 12 or 13. And so it's been a frustrating year in that regard because it started so poorly and then it got good, but then there was also some hiccups and you just, you kind of end up where you are.
You said you watched Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin versus Marc-Andre Fleury yesterday at XL Energy Center?
I did. It's, what I was thinking of, and you'll only appreciate this, and this is for an audience of 4, and I don't even know if you'll remember it, but do you remember our old intern, Brian Grant? You'd recognize him.
Yeah.
We just had him on. His neighborhood was actually destroyed by the wildfires out in California.
Him, yes.
But the 3 of us were in the XL Energy Center press box. We were at a Penguins Wild game, and he was trying to sell you on the idea of breaking up Crosby and Malkin's line. And that was like 16 years ago.
Yeah, back when they were like Stanley Cup champions.
Yes, yeah. And you were having none of it. Yeah, it was just a kid at a time trying to come in with a hot take.
I don't recall that.
And you're like, why wouldn't you break them up and make both? And you're like, well, I mean, they just won the cup. I think it's working out pretty well for them. Like, you had no time for it. But because I don't follow the NHL as closely as I once did, I obviously knew Crosby was there, and that's cool. To me, it's always cool. Like, it's weird to me that LeBron is now in the 2 seed because I went to one of the games here this December. And part of the reason why is because the wheels looked like they were completely coming off LeBron, looked like they were completely coming off the Lakers. And my thought was, I don't know how many times I'm going to get to watch LeBron James in person again.
Sure.
Who knows when this opportunity is going to come up? And I went to the game, and he was horrific. It was so bad. He was airballing elbow jumpers, the whole bit. But to watch Crosby play, but I had no idea Malcolm was still playing. I'm like 71.
He's still around.
I'm like, is that still him? And I'm kind of I go, I guess it is still him. That's crazy. Good for those guys. But yeah, it was. Fleury had a couple of really cool epic flower saves too in the first part.
Yeah, they made history yesterday. So Fleury at the age of 40 allowed goals to Malkin, who's 38, Crosby, who's 37. Yep. First time in NHL history that a goalie aged 40 or older allowed goals by 2 different players aged 37 or older in the same game.
I love it.
Never happened before.
I love it. We made similar history one time on Bumper to Bumper. We had Pat Kessler, Glenn Mason, Lou Nanny, and Dan Barrero. The only time a show had 4 people 70 years of age or older ever in the history of sports.
A combined 280 years old.
Yeah, it's the oldest show ever. We did that. We didn't take that picture that Russo took was awesome, or that someone took with the 3 of them, with Crosby, Malkin, and Flower. That was awesome. That was a very cool picture.
Thanks for helping today. Anything happening on the show after this?
Ben Gessling, Lou Nanny, speaking of Luigi, coming in studio, and Johnny Athletic at 5:30.
Thank you, JG. Thanks to Meat Sauce and Nordo for joining as well. I'll be back tomorrow. Go for Basketball Weekly at noon. I'll be back 1 to 3, Rosen at 2 o'clock. Thanks for listening. It's been a good day.
Listen back to any of Common Man's programs by podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.com.
Ever wake up feeling lousy, knowing something is off with your body? You don't have time for guesswork. You need Viome. Forget all the generic health fads. Viome doesn't tell you what you want to hear. It tells you what's actually going on inside your body. By analyzing your gut microbiome, Viome delivers a custom health plan that's as unique as your DNA. It's science, not nonsense. Want energy? Want better digestion? Viome has your back. Stop trusting amateurs. Go to Viome.com for a personalized gut professional now. Call *Gut to get $110 off any test. That's *488 to receive a link to the offer.